If you're watching this, then the story has found you. I'm glad you're here. Please, like and subscribe to my channel, and in the comments, tell me where you're listening from. I want to know how far my story of revenge has traveled. It began at my kitchen table, in a house filled with a silence as thick and suffocating as a morning fog. This silence had become a permanent, unwelcome guest. The old clock on the wall, a wedding gift from my late mother, ticked with a relentless, accusatory rhythm. Each talk was a painful reminder that the life I was living might be a beautiful, meticulously crafted lie. My husband, Julian, had just returned from another of his countless business dinners. He didn't just look exhausted, he looked haunted, as if carrying the weight of a secret too heavy for his shoulders. His face was a map of new lines and shadows. He tossed his jacket onto the sofa with a weariness that felt performative, loosened his tie as if it were a noose, and collapsed onto the bed without even bothering to shower. The familiar scent of his expensive cologne hung in the air, but it was now tainted by a new, alien fragrance, a sweet, floral perfume that felt like an intrusion, a brazen confession from a life I didn't know he was living. Minutes later, the gentle hum of his snoring filled the house, a sound that once brought me comfort, but now felt like a mocking lullaby. A lullaby for a fool. I moved with the quiet, practiced grace of a wife of 40 years, tidying the mess he left in his wake, his jacket, his wallet, his cell phone, his old laptop. The phone screen glowed, a new email burning like a sinister omen. I frowned. Julian never used email. He always said, "Juliet, all this tech stuff is too complicated. I'd rather just make a call," but there it was. A digital ghost from a life I didn't know he was leading. A morbid curiosity, both wrong and necessary, compelled me to open it. The message was short, a handful of words that shattered my world. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." It was followed by a red heart, a symbol of affection that pierced my own with a cold, sharp ache. I froze, as if slapped. The digital world had become a cruel mirror. "Dad." The word echoed. Who called him that? And in such an intimate tone? My thumb trembled as I swiped for more clues, but there was nothing. Just a jumble of meaningless characters, offering no answers, only more questions. A shiver ran through me. Not from cold, but from a profound, bone-deep fear. It felt like a cold wind whistling through a crack in the door of my life, revealing a secret chamber I never knew existed. I glanced into the bedroom. Julian turned over with a sputtering snore, his face peaceful, a stark, infuriating contrast to the storm raging inside me. My heart pounded like a thief's. I put the phone back, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped it. I continued cleaning, my movements now mechanical, robotic. As I gathered his clothes, I felt a folded piece of paper, crisp and new, a receipt from a fancy steakhouse in San Antonio, dated that very night. San Antonio? He had told me he was meeting partners in Dallas. A tiny, bitter laugh escaped my lips. Julian hated driving to Dallas. San Antonio was where his mother had lived. He had fond memories there. The receipt was for a party of 2. A bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, the same wine he'd bought for our 10th anniversary, a vintage I'd never forgotten. Filet and pasta. I tried to recall the last time Julian had taken me to a place like that. A decade ago, perhaps, when I opened my first bakery. A memory etched in my mind, flickering candlelight, his proud smile, his toast to my success. Now, that memory felt like a lie, a faded photograph in a scrapbook of deceit. With silent, determined resolve, I photographed the receipt and the email. I didn't want to believe it, but a woman's intuition, a wife's of 40 years, is a deep, primal knowing. Something was happening, and I had to find out what. My hands trembled not just with anger, but with a deep, existential dread. I felt I was standing on a cliff, about to witness the spectacular collapse of my entire life. I went to the garage. Julian's old SUV was still warm, the air thick with gasoline and that faint, sweet perfume. I opened the door, a cold dread gripping my stomach. I turned on my flashlight, searching every corner of the driver's seat. Loose change. An empty water bottle. Nothing. But as I reached into the glove box, My fingers brushed against something plastic and slippery. I pulled it out, and my heart stalled. A tube of used personal lubricant, with dried residue on the cap. A sticky, damning piece of evidence. Julian and I hadn't been intimate in years. He always claimed age had sapped his desire, so what was this for? The question echoed, each syllable a hammer blow to my fragile reality. I stood paralyzed in the dark garage, staring at it as if it were a dirty secret, a tangible manifestation of my worst fears. A survival instinct kicked in. I kept a clear head. I put it back exactly where I'd found it. I wiped my hands with a napkin, scrubbing them raw as if afraid the betrayal would leave a permanent stain. I continued searching, more methodically now. Under the back seat, I found crumpled napkins, soaked in that same sweet, floral perfume, a scent that wasn't a man's, and wasn't my soft, familiar rose. It was alien, defiant, a vulgar shout of infidelity in the quiet sanctuary of our garage. I photographed everything, the lubricant, the napkins, as if I could capture the scent in an image. I closed the car and went back inside, the weight of the evidence pressing down on me. Heavier than any sack of flour I'd ever lifted, I sat at the kitchen table, my hands trembling as I picked up Julian's phone again. I was now almost certain he was cheating. I checked his messages, only cold, dry work chats. His inbox was empty, save for that one strange email. The sent and draft folders were barren. Everything was too clean, suspiciously so, as if he had meticulously erased every trace. A master of lies, I thought bitterly. My rage was now a cold, hard stone in my chest, and a new, more dangerous emotion stirred. A desire for truth, a need to expose the lie, no matter the cost. The next morning, as soft light filtered through the curtains, I was already a ghost in my own house. The images of the lubricant, the receipt, and that email swirled in my head, a venomous carousel of doubt. I stood in the kitchen, my hands busy, my mind a frantic whirlwind. I made a simple breakfast, 2 fried eggs, toast, a cup of the strong black coffee Julian liked. I had barely slept. Julian came down. Hair a mess, eyes groggy. He sat, grabbed his coffee, took a sip, and set it down half full. "I have an important meeting today," he said, his voice husky, a rehearsed line he'd used countless times before, without looking me in the eye. "I'm sure I'll be home late." He was so good at this. The easy lies, the casual tone, made my blood run cold. I nodded with a strained smile, though all I wanted was to scream. "Where? With whom? In San Antonio again?" But I held back, my rage a silent fire. "All right," I replied. "Be careful." He got up, gave me a light pat on the shoulder, a gesture that felt more like an afterthought than affection, and left. The door closed, leaving the kitchen in a silence that echoed with my monstrous certainty. I cleared the table, washing the dishes one by one, the rhythm a small anchor in the storm. I couldn't just sit there. I needed hard evidence. I found Mrs. Miller's number, a friend from years ago who'd helped me open the bakery. She had once told me, "Juliet, if you ever need it, I can give you Thomas's number. He's a private investigator." Very discreet, I never thought I'd need to call him. But now, I had no choice. "Hello, Mrs. Miller. Can you help me get in touch with Thomas? I need him." She was silent for a moment, a pause that spoke volumes. "Juliet, what's going on? Did Julian do something?" I sighed, my pride bruised and raw. "I just need to know the truth. Can you help me?" Mrs. Miller, a woman of few words and profound intuition, agreed immediately. An hour later, a message arrived from Thomas, asking to meet at a small downtown cafe. "Mrs. Roberts, please don't worry. I will help you." The message was short, but it was a lifeline. At noon, I entered the cafe, a tiny place with worn wooden tables and the comforting aroma of roasted coffee that now felt foreign. I chose a secluded corner. Thomas walked in, a middle-aged man, short and stocky, wearing a simple light blue shirt. He had philosophical eyes that seemed to read everything, to see through surfaces. I handed him a flash drive with the photos. "This is all I have," I said, my voice shaky. "I'm not sure, but I think my husband is cheating on me." The words tasted like ash. Thomas nodded, reviewing each image impassively, making notes in a small notebook. "Mrs. Roberts, I understand. I'll start following Mr. Roberts this afternoon." "Don't worry, I'll let you know as soon as possible." I looked at him, tears burning my eyes. "Thank you," I said softly. "I just want to know the truth, whatever it may be." He nodded with compassion. "I'll do my best. Go home and don't do anything to arouse suspicion." I left the cafe, walking through the crowd, feeling a loneliness I had never known. 40 years of marriage, a lifetime built on a foundation of trust, was crumbling beneath my feet. I had trusted Julian implicitly. I believed he was a family man, my rock, my anchor. And now, I was hiring a stranger to follow my own husband. The irony was a bitter pill. I felt like a character in a bad drama I never auditioned for. That night, as I sat in the bakery surrounded by the familiar scents of yeast and flour, my phone vibrated. A message from Thomas. I opened it, my heart pounding, blood roaring in my ears. It was a photo of Julian, in his light blue shirt, entering a fancy restaurant, holding hands with a woman. I zoomed in. My heart stopped. It was Allison, my daughter-in-law. She wore a tight black dress, heavy makeup, intense red lipstick, her hair down. They didn't look like in-laws. They looked like a couple on a date, their bodies turned toward each other, sharing a secret. I sank into my chair, hands trembling. "Allison? How was this possible?" At family gatherings, they always acted distant, barely speaking. I now realized it was a masterful act, a performance for my benefit. Thomas sent more photos. In one, they sat in a secluded corner, candles and flowers between them. Allison was leaning in, smiling. Julian was toasting her with a tender gaze. A crushing pain seized my chest. In 40 years, I had never seen him look at me like that. Not even when we were young. Not even when I was that girl from San Diego with long hair and a radiant smile. That look of genuine adoration, a love I thought was mine, was now hers. In the middle of the night, a video arrived. The clock read 2 a.m. I put on my headphones, my hands so shaky I almost dropped the phone, and pressed play. Allison leaned close to Julian's ear, whispering something that made him laugh loudly, a sound that was a stranger to me. Her voice was sweet, her eyes sparkling. Then they got up, and Julian, ever the gentleman, opened the car door for her as if she were his lover. I replayed the video again and again, a self-inflicted torture. Each viewing felt like another stab to the heart. Allison, my daughter-in-law, whom I had treated like my own daughter, taught to make our family's traditional flan, and Julian, the man I had given my whole life to. What were they doing behind my back? Behind Daniel's back? The questions were a tidal wave, threatening to drown me. I saved everything to a flash drive, noting every detail, date, time, place, restaurant name. My hands worked on autopilot, my mind in chaos. I didn't want to believe Julian and Allison were capable of something so low, so cruel, but the evidence was undeniable, a mountain of proof. I stayed in the bakery among trays of sweet pastries, but I felt my world falling apart. I remembered the early days, when Julian would help me carry sacks of flour, when we would laugh together in that little kitchen, our dreams as big as the sky. Now, it all seemed a distant memory, a beautiful lie. The next morning, in the bakery's small kitchen, I held a list of orders for a downtown hotel. The smell of flour and vanilla, which always brought me peace, felt hollow. My phone vibrated. A message from the detective. "Mrs. Roberts, I'm sending you more evidence." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but my hands trembled as I opened it. A series of photos appeared. The first showed Julian leaving a law office near the main plaza. By his side was Allison in a beige office dress, her hair in a high ponytail, huge dark sunglasses covering her face, a pathetic attempt at anonymity. They walked close together. Not like in-laws, but like a couple. In the next photo, they stood before a 4-star hotel with gleaming glass doors. I zoomed in, desperately seeking a denial, but there was none. They looked too natural, too comfortable in a world I was not part of. Then, a short video. I pressed play, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The shot was from a distance, but clear enough. Julian and Allison on the third-floor hotel balcony. His arm was around her waist. She rested her head on his shoulder, her long hair moving in the wind. Then, like a stab, I saw them share a quick, unhidden kiss. It was brief, but it burned away the last spark of hope. I replayed it frame by frame, each image digging deeper into my soul, a slow, agonizing descent into hell. The room curtain opened slightly. Allison came out, running to hug Julian, her face lit with happiness, like a young girl in love. I slumped, clutching the table to keep from falling apart. Thomas wrote, "They also rented the room for the afternoon. It looks like they're staying the night." I'll keep watching. I read the message over and over, my throat tight. Just hours earlier, Julian had written to me, "Juliet, I won't be home tonight. I have to meet a potential partner from out of town. Get some rest." The tone was sweet, caring, just as it had been for years. But now I knew it was a well-constructed lie. A potential partner from out of town? He wasn't out of town. He was here, in a 4-star hotel, with our daughter-in-law. I saved every photo and video to my portable hard drive. Each time I hit save, I stared at the image to ensure I wasn't dreaming. In the video, Julian's gaze toward Allison was so tender, the way he caressed her hair. It reminded me of how he used to touch me over 30 years ago. We were young. I believed our love would last forever, a promise whispered under a starry San Diego sky. Now, all I saw were lies and blatant betrayal. I remembered family gatherings, everyone around the table, a tableau of our perfect family. Allison always sat far from Julian, sometimes looking at him with disgust. Daniel would joke, "Mom, I think Allison can't stand Dad. She avoids him like the plague." I had believed it, too. I thought they just didn't get along. Now I understood it was a farce, a carefully choreographed dance of deception. They had acted too well in front of me, in front of Daniel, in front of the whole neighborhood. I felt like a fool, a blind wife, betrayed by two traitors right under my nose. I replied to Thomas, "Thank you. Please keep watching. I need to know everything." He answered briefly, "I will. Stay calm." That night, I returned to the house that had been my home with Julian. It felt foreign now, a place of ghosts and lies. I opened a dresser drawer, took out a thick envelope, my hands moving with grim determination. I printed all the evidence, photos of them leaving the lawyer's office, entering the hotel, on the balcony, every frame of the video. I arranged them carefully, sealed the envelope, and hid it under old family photos. I looked at a photo of the four of us at Daniel's birthday party years ago. Allison was smiling, hugging Daniel tightly. Julian stood beside me, his arm on my shoulder, looking proud. Now, I wanted to rip it to pieces, to tear their smiling faces from my life. The next morning, just before dawn, I heard the front door open slowly. Julian staggered in, smelling of alcohol. The partner was too difficult. "Juliet," he complained, his voice raspy, eyes red. "I had to drink a lot. I'm dead tired." I was in the kitchen, a glass of water in my hand, watching him perform, feeling he was rubbing salt in the wound. "Rest," I replied calmly, the practiced voice of a wife. "You have to go to work tomorrow." He nodded, gave me a pat on the shoulder as if nothing had happened, and dragged himself to the bedroom. Minutes later, he was snoring peacefully, as if he'd never cheated, never gone to a hotel with our daughter-in-law. When I was sure he was asleep, my phone vibrated. A call from Thomas. "Mrs. Roberts." I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. I used special equipment. They didn't notice. "I'm sending it now." My heart pounded, but I simply replied, "Thank you, Thomas. Send me the file." Minutes later, an audio file appeared. I put on my headphones, sat at the table, and pressed play. The first thing I heard was Allison's voice, cold and ambitious. "Dad, hurry up with that fake contract. I want to have the whole chain of stores already. I want that old hag out of the house." A blow to my chest. I gripped the phone tightly, then Julian's voice, deep and confident, "Don't worry about those papers. Juliet doesn't know anything. Leave it in my hands. She trusts me too much." A knife twisted in my heart. They weren't just cheating. They were planning to take everything I had built. The bakery chain. All the sweat, tears, and sleepless nights. Every batch I baked. Every delivery I ran across town to maintain my reputation, it was all mine. Julian never once got his hands dirty. He never worked the counter or signed contracts. And now, he and Allison wanted to take it all, to kick me out of the home I had made. I almost broke down, but I maintained my composure, copying the audio to the flash drive. I carefully noted the time and place, trying to stay steady in the storm. The next morning, as I made coffee, my phone vibrated again. Thomas sent new photos taken with a telephoto lens. Julian and Allison were in his car, a thick pile of papers between them. Allison had a red pen, marking the document intently. Julian nodded and smiled in full agreement. Thomas wrote, "I overheard something. It seems they want to use a contact at the notary's office to make the transfer. I'll investigate further." I zoomed in. I could see letters, though I couldn't read them. But I knew these weren't normal papers. They were planning to steal everything I had worked for. Step by step, I sat among trays of sweet pastries, but I felt my world collapsing. I reopened the audio file, put on my headphones, and listened to every phrase, every word. That wretched old woman. That's what Allison called me. I remembered when she joined the family, when I taught her to make rice, when I hugged her like a daughter. I thought she was part of the family, that she would build a future with Daniel and Julian, the man I had loved since I was a girl, who swore he would be with me until the end. They had made a joke of me, a fool who still believed in love and family. A regular customer, Mrs. Peterson, came in. "Juliet, your bakery has been packed lately. Your chain is expanding. I'm so proud of you," she said warmly. I forced a smile. "Thank you. I'm doing my best." But inside, I was a wreck. I wondered what she would think if she knew the truth. Would she see me as strong, or just a fool betrayed by her husband and daughter-in-law? I wrapped her pastries, said goodbye, and sank into my chair, my hands on my head. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. Instead, a silent rage burned inside me like an oven fire, ready to ignite. That night at dinner, I sat across from Julian under the yellow kitchen light that gave his face a distorted glow. He ate and spoke monotonously, as if nothing were wrong. "Juliet, I have to sign some important business papers this week. Maybe you should look them over. They're complicated." I picked up a piece of bread, pretending to take a bite, but in my head, I heard Allison's voice, "Dad, hurry up and sign the fake contracts." He was testing the waters, trying to drag me into his dirty plan. I gave him a dry smile. "Yes. I'll look at them later. I'm tired now." He nodded, took a sip of wine, looking at me as if nothing were wrong. But I knew behind that smile was a man ready to take everything I had built, a predator waiting to strike. Julian had a few more glasses of wine. His face turned red, he slurred words about a difficult client. I nodded as if listening, but inside I wanted to scream, "Do you think I'm that stupid?" When he staggered to the bedroom, I cleared the table. My every move slow, containing the boiling anger. He threw himself on the bed, snoring loudly, and left his car keys on the nightstand, gleaming under the dim light, a siren's call to my revenge. I stared at them, my heart pounding. This was my chance. I entered the bedroom slowly, careful not to make a sound. Every step felt like walking between pain and resolve. I grabbed the keys, squeezed them tight, and went to the garage. The night was quiet, hushed. All I heard were crickets, their chirping a soundtrack to my silent fury. I turned on my phone's flashlight. The weak light illuminated Julian's old SUV. I opened the door. The smell of gasoline and that strange sweet perfume remained. I opened the glove compartment. There it was, the tube of lubricant. Cap loose, dried residue on the edge, a monument to their infidelity. I held it, feeling I was holding their dirty secret. It was clear they had used it again. Confirmation that their twisted game continued. I took the tube to the kitchen, placed it on the counter, and washed my hands with lemon soap, scrubbing thoroughly to erase every trace of the betrayal. The fresh scent didn't calm my anger, but it helped me focus. I opened the tool drawer and took out a tube of clear industrial superglue, the kind I once used to fix a bakery chair. A tool of my trade, now a weapon of my revenge. I carefully unscrewed the lubricant cap and filled the tube with glue, drop by drop, until it was full. I wiped the nozzle, shook it gently, and tested it. It came out smoothly, just like the original. At a glance, no one would notice. I smiled faintly, a hurricane raging inside me. This wasn't a game. It was the first step toward justice. I put the tube back in the glove compartment, adjusted the mat and seat, and closed the car. I opened the trunk, crumpled bags, an empty water bottle, and an unused condom in the corner. My heart skipped a beat, but I wasn't surprised. I took pictures, adding them to my collection, each image a reminder that I couldn't let them get away with their lies. Back inside, I returned the keys. I grabbed an old book and sat on the living room sofa, pretending to read. The dim light fell on the pages, but I couldn't read a word. My head was spinning. I thought of Daniel, who believed he was living happily with Allison. How could I tell him his wife and his own father were betraying us? I thought of the bakery chain, the 40 years of work and sleepless nights, the fights with Julian to defend my dream. I had trusted he supported me. Now I knew he was just waiting for the right moment to take everything. An hour later, Julian woke and stumbled into the kitchen for water. He saw the keys on the counter, unsuspecting. "Still not sleeping, Juliet?" he asked groggily. I smiled. "No, just reading a bit." "Finish your water and go back to bed." He nodded, drank, and returned to the bedroom, snoring immediately. I looked at him as if he were a stranger. This man, who once promised to be with me until the end, was now planning to destroy what I loved most, but he didn't know I had started my counterattack. At dawn, I got up. Timid sunlight entered the bakery window. I was in my usual kitchen, kneading dough, preparing flans and pastries for a large hotel order. I pressed the dough with all my might, channeling my rage into every movement. When I returned home for breakfast, I kept a calm face. Julian was up with a cup of black coffee. I served him eggs and toast. "Julian," I said calmly, "I have to travel to Nashville tomorrow to sign a contract with a new partner. I'm sure I'll be home late. Can you take care of dinner?" I watched him out of the corner of my eye. He looked up, surprised, but his eyes shone with something that wasn't concern. It was relief. "A big contract?" he asked, taking my hand with feigned tenderness. "Don't worry. Go ahead. I'll handle it." But that spark in his eyes, that slight curve of his lips, as if a weight had been lifted, pierced my chest. He wanted me to leave, and I knew why. I smiled and nodded. "Thanks. I'll call you if I get back late." He took another sip of coffee, then got up, saying he had to get to the office early. As he left, I saw he left his phone on the table. The screen lit up with a missed call. The name. AT. I frowned. My heart pounded. Allison Thomas. I was sure it was her. Before I could touch the phone, Julian returned, grabbed it hurriedly, and turned off the screen. "I forgot it," he mumbled with a forced smile, and was gone. I stood there, watching the door close, feeling slapped. He wasn't even bothering to hide it anymore. That day, I worked like a machine, delivering bread, signing invoices, smiling at customers. But my mind was focused only on Julian and Allison. I couldn't let their farce continue. That night, I pretended to be tired. "I have to wake up early to catch the bus, so I'm going to sleep." He nodded, gave me a pat on the shoulder. "Rest, Juliet. Be careful on your trip." I lay down, closed my eyes, but sharpened my hearing. Close to midnight, when Julian's snoring stopped, I heard him get out of bed quietly. The faint light of his phone shone. He left the room, thinking I was asleep. I stayed still, my heart pounding. Then I slowly got up and followed on tiptoe, hiding behind the thick living room curtain, He stood in a dark corner near the window, phone to his ear, speaking softly. Yes, of course. Come over to the house tomorrow. We won't have to go to a hotel anymore. Juliet has to leave town to sign a contract. She'll be back late. A soft giggle from the other side. Allison's sweet voice. That's great, Dad. Finally, we can relax, Julian laughed. Yeah, come early. I'll be waiting. I stood behind the curtain, my blood boiling. They weren't just cheating. They were planning to turn my house, my son's home, into their meeting place. I returned to the bedroom, opened a drawer, and took out Daniel's old college recorder. I checked the battery, put in a new one, and turned on continuous recording. I hid it behind the bookshelf next to the headboard, certain it would capture everything. I adjusted the cable and covered it with a family photo frame, the four of us at Daniel and Allison's wedding. Looking at it, I felt a bitter taste. Allison's smile, Julian's hug. All eyes. I checked the recorder was working, placed the frame just right, and lay down. Pretending to sleep, Julian returned, threw himself on the bed, and snored as if nothing were wrong. But my eyes were wide open in the darkness. I set the alarm for earlier than usual. I closed my eyes. Not to sleep, but to prepare for the next step. I woke at 5 a.m., when it was still dark. Only streetlight glow came through the window. The house was silent, save for Julian's steady snoring. I was in the kitchen, a cup of cold coffee in my hand, staring at the skillet of oil on the stove. The last step of my plan, a simple smoke trap, but enough to expose the truth. I tied a thin string to the stove's igniter, ran it to the window, and attached it to a heavy coffee can. All I had to do was pull it from a distance, and the flame would ignite the oil, creating thick black smoke, enough to alarm the neighbors. I opened the window a little so the smoke could escape. I tested it once, the smoke rose quickly in spirals, a warning. I turned it off immediately, checked everything, and left no trace. I put on a jacket, grabbed my large purse, and pretended to leave for my trip. Before leaving, I gently shook Julian. I have to go to the bus station. I'm going to sign a contract. I'll probably be back late tonight. He opened his eyes, sleepy. All right, be careful, Juliet. Call me if you need anything. He buried his face in the pillow and went back to sleep. I looked at the man I once loved and trusted, now lying unaware of the trap waiting for him. I turned away, my heart heavy but my legs steady. Instead of going to the station, I went across the street to Mrs. Peterson's house. She opened the door, worried. Juliet, what are you doing up so early? Is something wrong? I forced a smile. Mrs. Peterson, can I stay here for a few hours? I need to watch my house. She frowned but said nothing else. She poured me a hot coffee and gave me a chair by the window. From there, I could see my house, where the truth would be revealed. Around 10 a.m., a taxi pulled up. Allison got out, wearing a light floral dress and dark sunglasses, as if afraid of being recognized. Julian opened the door, looked around hurriedly, and ushered her inside. I gripped my coffee cup, my heart pounding. It's time, I murmured, and turned on the app connected to the hidden recorder. Sound came through my headphones, Allison's laughter, clinking glasses, heavy footsteps, Julian's deep voice. All right, we don't have to hide in a hotel anymore, Allison laughed. You really know how to pick your moments. The old hag is gone, right? I bit my lips, holding back rage as she called me the old hag with contempt. Then, the bed creaked, along with other sounds I didn't want to hear. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. Just a little longer, Juliet. A few minutes later, suddenly, Allison screamed, "What the hell is this? We're stuck." Her voice was panicked, almost sobbing. Julian growled, "Shut up. Wait. Let me see," I smiled. I barely touched my phone, activating the smoke trap remotely. The string pulled hard. The stove ignited. The oil caught fire. Black smoke billowed out the kitchen window in thick spirals, spreading like an alarm. Mrs. Peterson gasped, looking out. "Juliet, your house is on fire." I pretended to be scared, but inside, I felt strangely calm. Neighbors came out, shouting, "Juliet's house is on fire. Call the firefighters." Mr. Miller took out his phone and called the fire department. I stayed, holding my coffee cup, my eyes fixed on my house. Everything was going to plan. In my headphones, Allison's voice grew more desperate. "Julian, do something." "I can't move," Julian roared. "Don't scream." "I'm trying," but I knew they couldn't do anything. The industrial superglue was at work, trapping them at their most humiliating moment. I imagined them struggling, scared, and a part of me felt satisfied, not from cruelty, but because they had pushed me to this. They wanted to take my bakery, my family, my honor. Now, they would pay. I looked out. The smoke thickened. Neighbors crowded together, yelling in panic. "What's going on? Where's Juliet?" "She went out of town for work." Mrs. Peterson, next to me, looked at me with suspicion but didn't speak. She just squeezed my hand gently. I knew she had a hunch, but I needed no explanation. The truth was about to explode. Just 10 minutes later, a fire truck siren sounded. The red vehicle skidded to a stop. I saw Daniel jump out in his fire chief uniform, his face tense. My son shouted, "Get the equipment ready quick. There might be people inside." I looked at him, a sharp pain in my heart. My son, so proud of his family, was about to face the cruelest truth. I wanted to run and hug him, to say I was sorry. But I had no choice. I stayed still. The smoke continued to rise thickly, making Daniel and his team believe it was serious. My son led with a sledgehammer, breaking down the front door. The sound of splintering wood echoed. His teammates followed with hoses and extinguishers. I listened to the commotion from the bedroom. Julian's desperate shouts mixed with Allison's sobs. "Do something, Julian." "I can't move." Julian growled, "Shut up. Don't scream." I bit my lips, squeezing the phone transmitting the audio. They were trapped, helpless, just as I calculated. Daniel entered the bedroom. I could imagine what he found: his father and his wife, naked, stuck together, faces pale with pain and panic. I wasn't there, but through my headphones, I heard Daniel's voice falter. What is this?" A firefighter murmured, "Oh my God." Another let out a nervous laugh. But Daniel shouted, "Silence." I knew that cry wasn't just for order, it was his last attempt to hide his pain. The humiliation was exposed, to Daniel, the fire team, the whole neighborhood. A firefighter ran out. "Chief, the smoke is under control." It was just a small oil fire. Nothing serious. But Daniel didn't reply. I imagined him frozen, seeing what was before him. Neighbors arrived, crowding the door, pointing, whispering. "What's happening?" "It's Julian and his daughter-in-law." "Oh my God, how could this happen?" Mrs. Peterson, next to me, took out her phone and silently started recording, moving the camera toward Julian and Allison writhing in bed, faces contorted. She looked at me with pity and anger. "Juliet, you knew about this, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I just nodded softly, my eyes on the window. Daniel came out of the bedroom. I heard his boots on the hardwood floor. Through the headset, Julian shouted, "Get everyone out. Close the door, Daniel," but it was too late. The whole neighborhood was gathered, faces disdainful, whispers a chorus of shame. Father-in-law and daughter-in-law caught in the act. Unbelievable. Poor Juliet. How did it come to this? The firefighters, after a moment's hesitation, had to act. They wrapped sheets around Julian and Allison, trying to cover their stuck bodies, and carried them out on stretchers. I heard Allison's broken sobs, groans of pain. "Please, do something, I can't stand it anymore." Julian mumbled weakly, "Don't let anyone see us," but the whole neighborhood had seen. There were looks of revulsion, mocking laughs, disappointed head shakes. They were carried out wrapped in thin sheets amidst growing murmurs. "What a disgrace." Father-in-law and daughter-in-law, my God, how filthy. The crowd remained as the ambulance left, siren blaring. Among loud voices, I heard laughter. "What a show!" Mr. Miller shouted. I can't believe there are people so shameless, an old woman whispered. Poor Juliet. I stood among them, pretending to have just run from the bus station, surprised. Daniel stood motionless in the yard, arms hanging, face pale as a ghost. His teammates avoided his gaze, quietly gathering tools. I knew he wasn't just shocked by the scene, but by the double betrayal of the two people he loved most. I wanted to run and hug him. To say I was sorry he had to see that, but I held back. I walked behind Mrs. Peterswain, who silently accompanied me to the hospital. We sat in the third-floor hallway, waiting. I maintained the concerned look of a wife who'd just discovered her house was on fire. Hours later, a doctor came out, sweating. He looked at me, speaking low. Mrs. Roberts. We managed to separate them. Fortunately, no serious damage. They just need some skin ointment. I nodded, pretending relief, while my fingers brushed against my purse, where I had hidden 2 tubes of thick mustard I had prepared. Thank you, doctor, I said, voice trembling to hide my plans. Can I see them? He nodded, leading me to the nurse's station, where they gave me 2 tubes of ointment. The nurse, a young woman, looked at me with compassion. Ma'am, this is a very difficult situation. I'm so sorry. I gave a weak smile, and the moment she turned, I swapped the tubes for the mustard. I entered the hospital room, a tube of mustard in my hand, feigning concern. Julian, Allison, are you okay? Allison was in bed, hair a mess, eyes red, unable to look at me. Julian, pale, mumbled, Juliet, I can explain. I didn't let him continue. I placed the tube of mustard on the table and left. Minutes later, a gut-wrenching scream came from the room. Allison cried. It burns. My skin is on fire. Julian writhed, cursing. What the hell is this? Who did this? The hallway was in an uproar. Patients and family looked out. An old woman whispered, it's them. A couple from the video this morning on the internet. The father-in-law with the daughter-in-law. What a disgrace. Another added, they deserve it. The doctor ran in, asking nurses to clean their skin and apply a neutralizing agent. But the humiliation of Julian and Allison was already public, impossible to stop. Mrs. Peterson's video of them on the stretcher had spread through the neighborhood and social media. I was in the hallway, listening to murmurs, feeling the whole world witness their downfall. When the crowd dispersed, Daniel entered with a thick folder. I had called him, asking him to get the envelope of evidence and the 2 divorce papers I had ready. He handed me the folder, his gaze empty, wordless. I opened it, took out the documents, and placed them before Julian and Allison. I looked Julian in the eyes, my voice cold but firm. 40 years of marriage end here, sign these, and then do whatever you want, as long as you disappear from my son's life and mine. Allison collapsed, crying, looking at Daniel. Honey, forgive me. I made a mistake. Please. I beg you. Forgive me. But Daniel just looked at her, his gaze hard as stone, and left without a word. Julian tried to grab my hand, his voice trembling. Juliet, listen to me. I didn't want this. I pulled away. Don't say anything else, Julian. You chose this path. He yelled desperately, Juliet, please. But the nurse came in. Be quiet. This is a hospital. I turned and walked away without looking back. In the hallway, I saw Daniel leaning against the wall, his head in his hands. I put my hand on his shoulder, but he didn't lift his face. Mom, he whispered, broken. Why did it have to be Dad? Why her? I didn't answer. I just hugged him tightly, sharing his pain. In that moment, I knew Julian and Allison had lost everything, their honor, their marriages, their dirty plan. But Daniel and I had also lost a family. I only hoped that with time, we would find peace. Epilogue. A few weeks after the scandal, my bakery was busier than ever. The little bell on the door didn't stop ringing. Customers came with smiles and compliments. Juliet, you are so strong, Mrs. Peterson said, holding a bag of fresh flan. The whole neighborhood is proud of you for how you defended your family business amidst all that filth. I smiled and thanked her. People supported me. They called me strong, but only I knew that strength came from the broken pieces of my heart. Every time I looked at the oven where I had worked with sweat and tears for 40 years, I remembered Julian and Allison, who wanted to take everything from me, but failed, and I'm still here. With my bakery. With Daniel. With a new life. Daniel moved in with me right after. He didn't talk much, but I noticed the change. He wasn't the cheerful, laughing Daniel he used to be. His eyes now looked deep, carrying a wound that wouldn't heal. "Mom, I want to stay here for a while," he told me the first night, suitcase in hand. "I'm going to help you run the bakery, talk to clients, whatever you need." I hugged him, feeling the warmth of the sun I had raised, and just nodded. I knew we both needed time. Every morning, we opened the bakery together. I prepared the oven and arranged trays. Daniel reviewed invoices and called hotels. "Mom, the Grand Hotel wants to increase their sweet pastry order for next week," he called from the cash register, his voice calm but without its usual brightness. "All right," I replied. "Confirm the order. I'll prepare more dough." These simple moments gave me a peace I hadn't felt in years. No more fake looks from Julian, no more sweet, calculating voice from Allison. It was just Daniel and me, taking care of what we still had. Dinners were just the two of us now. We sat face to face in the small kitchen, eating simple meals. Sometimes rice with beans and chicken, sometimes just bread with coffee. "Mom, can you make me some flan this weekend?" he asked one night with a faint smile, the first I had seen since the scandal. "All right," I replied, relieved, "but you have to help me stir the caramel." He nodded. And in that moment, I felt we were slowly recovering. I started making time for myself, something I rarely did in 40 years. I joined a cooking club at the community center, where women my age shared recipes and stories. "Juliet, you make the best flan in the neighborhood," a woman told me, laughing as I brought a tray. I smiled. "It's a little trick I learned back in San Diego." I also started going to church on weekends. I would sit in silence, the stained glass light on my face, and pray, not for Julian or Allison, but for Daniel and myself, that we would find the strength to move forward. Sometimes, I walked with Mrs. Peterson in the town square, listening to neighborhood gossip. "You know, Juliet," she'd say, eyes shining, "everyone is still talking about Julian and Allison, but they say you're the one who won." I just smiled without answering. I won. Maybe. But the price was losing my whole family. Daniel also changed. He became less quiet, telling me about his work. "We put out a fire at the market yesterday," he said one night at dinner. "It was really dangerous, Mom. But luckily, no one got hurt." I listened, my heart filled with pride. "Please be careful," I said, voice trembling. "You're all I have left." Daniel looked at me with tenderness. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll never leave you alone." Those words were medicine. They gave me back the faith that, even though I had lost so much, I still had my son. One afternoon, the bakery full of customers, I sat at the cash register, watching the street. The bell rang non-stop. The smell of sweet bread filled the air. I looked at the trays of flan and pastries and thought of the entire journey. I had built this bakery with my own hands. From a girl in San Diego to a woman who knew how to endure. Julian and Allison wanted to take everything from me, but failed. I kept my bakery. I kept Daniel. And most importantly, I kept myself. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you for your sweet support.